Hey everybody, Tim Anderson here, aka Renfell. Welcome back. It is a Saturday morning. It's early. It's 7 a.m. I was inspired to make a very personal video this morning about my love of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and the first trip that I took outside of the United States when I was 19, specifically to go to Oxford and visit the Eagle and the Child, the Bird and the Bastard pub where the Inklings met. So this will be a fun video. It's not really a rant or discussion or anything else. I just want to talk about that. We may talk a little bit more about some C.S. Lewis and Tolkien friendship stuff, what inspired me as a writer. So if you like that kind of stuff, hopefully you do like the video. And if you get to the end of it and you're like, this sounds pretty cool, I might want more from this dude, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of the content that I produce. And of course, don't forget you can join our Discord. Links are down below. Let's dive in. Saturday morning. It's first thing. It's early. I have not had coffee. The kettle's on. Let's dive back into time a little bit because as a 42-year-old, 19 years old was a long time ago. So the scene was that my uncle, who was like the kind of the accent child of my grandparents, the younger brother of my dad, he was doing a foreign exchange program in London. And he was like, dude, you should come out there with us, stay for a couple of weeks, and just come party with us in London. And there was a part of me that sounded cool because I was 19. You could legally drink in London or in England, and I was like, that'd be fun. But there was the deeper part of me where I first read the Chronicles of Narnia. It was the first book series I ever read when I was 5 years old, and then immediately from that into The Hobbit, and then from The Hobbit went into The Lord of the Rings by the time I was 7. So these books had formed the foundation of my love of fantasy, and all through my you know, early childhood into my teens, I had always wanted to be a fantasy writer. I was the kid in English class who would go home on the weekends and write out on paper in notebooks these 12, 15-page short stories. I would come back into class and I would give them to my friends to read. I was the only, this is a fun thing, the only student in my English class who was allowed to go off the list of approved reading material that the teachers often have because they know those books and so they can tell whether or not you actually read that book to give the report or not. I was the only student in that class the teacher was like, yeah, just absolutely, because she knew that I love to read and I love to dissect stories and everything. So yeah, there was that part of me that was like, sure, cool, let's go to London and let's party with my friends and go to some raves. Which went to a Fat Boy Slim raid in the bottom of this like club that was like downtown in like a bat cave. It was crazy. Um, but the primary reason for me wanting to go was because I wanted to go to Oxford and I wanted to go to the Eagle and the Child pub. I wanted to go to this place, the Bird and the Bastard, where the Inklings had met. And I didn't really know a lot about the other Inklings at the time. I just know that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien's had been very good friends. And by the time I was 19, I had read, you know, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion. I'd also read a whole bunch of C.S. Lewis. Screwtape Letters, I had read The Chronicles of Narnia and his Space Trilogy, which, for those of you who've never read that, um, it is equal to what C.S. Lewis was doing with Middle Earth in terms of building a mythology. Probably not as expansive, but I would argue that it's equally as creative because he also had his own version of like God and angels and demons and all these things that were going on with the planets. It's a heavy, heavy series. Anyway, I diverge. And so I went to England and I went to Oxford. I spent money that I didn't have to go. I literally drained my bank account as a 19-year-old kid. I was living on my own from the time I was 16, and so this idea of going was like cool. So that was my first trip out. Now, what really got me inspired was this morning when I went over to YouTube. One of the first comments that I saw from someone from Elizabeth was talking about how if you look at there was the video I did on racism and race in Middle Earth and was Tolkien a racist and all this other stuff. They were talking about the friendship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and the fact that these guys worked together to create their stories. And if you look at C.S. Lewis, for example, even though yes, looking at the original Chronicles of Narnia, um, those first few books, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, all of those characters were white. You have to remember in The Horse and His Boy, Shasta falls in love with a dark-skinned, dark-haired, dark-eyed girl from, and essentially, as I recall, it was like sort of an Arabian style country, and there was that multi-interracial relationship happening in one of the Narnia books as well, and they fell in love and got married, and etc. And this just brought me back around to thinking about what a cool series Narnia was, and it never got. And this article in Forbes, by the way, I'm going to drop this down. It's an older article, I think. Yeah, this is a more than 4 year old. It came out in 2017. They were talking about, there is a fourth Chronicles of Narnia movie in the works and everything, and that could be cool. Silver Chair is one of my favorite books from the book series, and it would be cool to see that play out. Obviously, you have a different cast of characters. Doesn't really matter at this point. But this article is about how Chronicles of Narnia may never be a Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings level of success, but it still is one of those influential fantasy series that is equal to, in my mind, going back to the Lord of the Rings. Now, it's not as deep, that's for sure. It's not like the massive world building that is, Middle Earth and Tolkien. But Narnia itself is complex, and it has a lot of complex things going on. The White Witch, as an example, is not necessarily evil just for the sake of being evil. She has her own agendas. Getting into The Horse and His Boy, we get to visit other realms. We see interracial relationships being played out, and this is all very progressive for the time that it was being written. And you have to remember that these guys, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and then the rest of the Inklings, were constantly meeting up at the time, to kind of hash out the things they were working on and kind of do these private readings between themselves on what was going on in their books. And I think that that's something that's really cool. Writers clubs are something that, I think are very helpful to writers, whether they're just getting started or they're more professional and they've been doing it for a while. But one of the things I do love, and I always come back to when I start thinking about people who want to try to infuse the race issue into, say, Tolkien or into C.S. Lewis's work, I always come back to, yeah, you look at the kids from the first few books of the Narnia series, and they were all young white kids, but that was what England was at the time, was a bunch of white. It didn't have the levels of interracial mixture that we have today, and so it's just a product of its time. And some people might like to say that, well, they were racist and they didn't know it, products at the time. I like to strip all that out and just say, let's look at this amazing friendship of these two really cool creative minds and how that has inspired thousands, if not tens of thousands, and multiple generations of people just like me who wanted to become a writer, and the works of C.S. Lewis and the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, which we never viewed as controversial or racist or anything else. We viewed them as inspirational, and we viewed the friendship that these two men had as something very inspirational, and which pushed us to create really amazing things, and also fostered within us this love of fantasy and science fiction that, at least for me, has persisted since I was 5 years old till the time I'm 42. And I hear the kettle, so I got to wrap this up and go grab my coffee. So I would like to say to everybody, hopefully, if you've come to this channel because of my rants on Rings of Power and my discussions on Tolkien, hopefully you'll stick around, because I do want to talk about Narnia. I want to talk about Shannara. I want to talk about some of these other book series that I've loved and the authors that inspired me and these book series in greater detail as this channel continues to evolve over time. So thanks so much for your trust. I really appreciate those of you who have followed along since things started to go crazy the last week or so. If you've gotten to the end of this video and you haven't already done so, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, all those good things. And if you want to know more about who I am, there's a Discord link down below, and the project that I'm working on with my wife and my brother called The Weave in the Void, which is a world we're fleshing out over on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/wandering hermits. So hopefully we'll see you in all the places. Until next time, stay safe, everybody.